what we really need to do is we need to separate flashbacks from backstory. You can't have an opening chapter that doesn't have backstory. Your story was happening before this chapter started. Like, it just was. So, like, we have to know something. You're going to have like, here, we get the master's words floating in. That happened. That's backstory. That happened before the story. The fact that there's something that has happened to this city, that's backstory. And obviously, if you trust me and I do my job, then fairly quickly, I'm going to tell you what that is, because that's coming up soon.
Yeah.
That's backstory. But that's different than a flashback. So like, let's say here on 22, the his master's words floated into his mind. Let's say instead I went, which so many writers would do, his mind wandered back to that time 3 weeks ago. And then I write the scene of him standing on the roof and looking down at his master, and his master going, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I just want to try this out." And then he jumps and his, what he feels and all of that. And maybe that's cool, but what does that do for this moment that I'm in here? It stops it. It completely puts this on hold. I should have just started back then. You say this all the time. If you're writing a flashback in your opening couple of pages or chapter, it's because you didn't start in the right spot. If I need the reader to live the moment of Clytus jumping off that roof, then I need to start the story there. That's obviously important.
Releasing your inner dragon.
So, Marie, I heard that you critiqued something that just made your web toes curdle.
Yes. Yes, I did. Okay, so let's start with this. If you have watched this podcast at all, you know that I have a horror for flashbacks and info dumps. And I am very, very much a martinet when it comes to it in the opening chapter. But this was egregious. This had me typing paragraphs of why everything in here is wrong.
Yeah.
So
it was rough.
It was rough. So I once again come before you to ask, please, before you dump your backstory on me, invest me in the character. Give me a reason to care.
Yeah, you said something there in the prep that I think is a brilliant way to say it. You said, let's see if I can get this exactly right. Don't tell me the backstory of how the character became the character they are today. Make me connect to the character they are today, and then I'll want to learn the things that created them to be the character that they are today. But if exactly. I don't care about the character, why would I care about how they made it? And so many authors, because that just hits the nail on the head. So many authors are like, I need to make sure they understand that, that their father put cigarettes out on their back, which is why they are this way. But I don't like the character yet. Like, show me how they are today. And then once I actually connect with the character, I'll be like, why is this character this way? What caused this?
Connect me to the character and make me interested in the backstory. Don't dump the backstory on me and expect that to make me interested in what the character is like now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and just to expand on that just a little bit before we go on, here's what I think every writer needs to understand. And here's where your blind spot is. When you're writing the opening scene, it's not the first time you've read that opening scene, because you've thought about the story, you've thought about the character, you've gotten to know the character, you've actually fallen in love with your story, you're excited about this story. You have a ton of baggage that you're bringing into that moment that the reader has none of. That first word in your novel is the first word that the reader is even getting a hint of what they're about to experience. So when you, and I say this about, I was at a convention last weekend with a bunch of agents. So we ended up talking a lot about submitting and querying and everything like that with the people that would come up to me because I'm not an agent. But the problem with most people's first writing is they don't understand that they're writing to someone who doesn't give a crap about their character, their story, anything. And what they're doing is they're writing it in a way that they're writing to someone who already loves it. And it's the same thing with a query letter, since I threw that out. You know, people who write query letters to send to agents, they write them in a way that they think that the person they're sending them to wants to read it, that is excited to hear about their story. Yeah, they don't want to read it. They actually want to reject you as fast as possible, which means you have to write it in a way that you're writing it to an enemy, that you're writing it to somebody who wants to prove you wrong. So it's a challenge. That's why so many people fail at that query letter. And it's why so many people fail at that opening chapter. Your reader doesn't care yet. You have to write your opening to a reader that you're trying to convince to keep reading, not that already loves it and let them just, have fun in it. That's not what they're here for. You have to buy that loyalty. You have to buy that commitment to continue reading that story. And that's, I think, the kernel of what writers miss, is they write the opening for them and not for the person who knows nothing about this.
So we have spoken before in previous episodes about what you shouldn't do with your opening scene and so on, and all of the mistakes people make. So we thought that this time around, rather than speaking about what you shouldn't do, we'll speak about what you should do, in our opinion. Obviously, everything is subjective, by also sharing like some of our writing and talking about what we tried to do. And you can let us know in the comments if you disagreed and felt that we completely failed at all the things we talk about. But we'll explain what we tried to do in these opening chapters to show them to you.
Yeah. And as I always say, the crazy thing about when we talk about stuff like this, it's all subjective. So if, I read something that I wrote and you go, wow, 100%, that definitely made me do it, you're right. But if I read something, the same exact something, and you go, wow, that failed miserably, you're right. It failed for you miserably. Like, there's no argument there. Yeah. So the reason why I bring that up is most people forget that when they are reviewing other people's stuff, because they go, this failed for me, so obviously it's going to fail for everyone else in the entire world. Like, that's not the way this works. It's subjective.
Yeah.
You are 100% right. If you hate something that one of us wrote, you're right. It does not work for you. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't work for other people. But that's where the stars.
It doesn't work for you.
Well, but that's where the stars come into play. As long as I'm running, which is where I normally sit, 4.7, 4.8, 4.9 out of 5 stars, that means that way more people find it that it works for them than don't. You'll never bat 1,000%. But that's, and if you're running a 1-star, 2-star, even 3-star, because that's only 50-50, that's the litmus test of, there's enough people that subjectively think it's not good that the mass majority are thinking it's not good. So you're going to need to work on that. Yeah. But one person's opinion doesn't mean anything. It's a collective. Yeah. So anyway, just trying to make the world a better place for our viewers. Probably not going to work.
All right. So who are we going to start?
I'm spitting into a hurricane.
Yeah, people are very the art of the nuanced take is swiftly dying in the time of the internet.
Yes. I still say I can fix that. All we need is every computer must mandatorily come with a little attachment on the monitor that when you say something hateful, it actually punches you in the face. Because that's, in my generation, you could only say things hateful to people's faces, and then they punched you in the face. So you learn really quickly, wow, maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe I should keep that to myself. There's no punching in the faces anymore. That's all I'm saying. So just a little box right there on the computer, punch you in the face when you say something stupid. And then you learn. Keep that to yourself. That's what we're missing. No punches in the faces. All of that was a joke, people.
Who's starting?
Yes. Well, let's I've got a list of things that we talked about before this to kind of thing, and I think we can just walk through it kind of in order. So we both agree that the number one thing, we just talked about it, but I'll put a pin in it so that it's defined. The number one thing that you need to do is make sure that the reader connects to the character. It doesn't necessarily mean likes the character. It just means that as quickly as possible, the reader is interested enough to want to continue following that character. So, I've got a chapter for a novella of mine that I'm working on that I think does a really good job of making you actually, that gives you that hook, that thing that you go, okay, yeah, no, I want to learn more about this. So if you want, I can start with that one.
Yeah, for it.
All right. So I will share my screen. Pretty sure this is the one. It's the problem with having multiple monitors. All right. So this novella is called Shadows of the Blood, and chapter 1 is called Tiny Lifeless Bodies. So just reading the first couple of paragraphs, I'll just read to like 26. The distinct clacking of Drakenscale armor assaulted Clytus Rillian's ears, echoing in the deserted street. The icy fingers of fear crawled up the nape of his neck. Changing direction, he ghosted into a side alley and slipped behind a stack of empty crates. Ignoring the stench of rotting refuse, he melted into the shadows as 3 Musari, hard-eyed men sworn to die for the blood, stalked past. Silver moonlight glinted off the lacquered plates of their armor, and death painted each chiseled face of the heavily armed and armored black men. Considering current events, there was no telling what these warriors would do to a foreign-born Hekai if they caught him out and about this late in the eve. Nothing healthy, to be sure. Once the sound of their passing dissipated into the night, Clytus began counting to himself. His hand fell to his sword, seeking comfort in the worn leather covering its hilt. It was not as if he had any desire to test his steel against the armor of a Musari. Not only would that bring shame upon his master's house, Clytus was not sure he would survive the encounter. Sujin, however, begged him to try. The power pressed against him from beyond the physical realm, demanding it be allowed to fill him to the brim. His master's words floated to the surface of his mind. Sujin be bringing with it strength, speed, endurance. Yet it no be making you invulnerable, you stone-headed fool. The retort had been delivered after Clytus jumped off the 4th-story balcony during training, just to see if he could. Turns out, I could. So I'll stop there and kind of talk about it. So we get instantly into some action, or at least perceived action, because there's not actually a fight. There's just a potential that he's trying to avoid a fight. But we learn, in these 26 lines, you get a lot of Clytus's personality, that he is kind of young and brash, and he's got a kind of a cocky sense of humor and willing to buck authority. You also learn an entire magic system. Like, you get that you hear Sujin for the first time, which you have no idea what that means, but then you find out, oh, Sujin is strength, speed, and endurance. Okay, so it's some type of magic that makes you stronger, faster, and more damage taking, but it doesn't make you invulnerable. And I think it's enough for me and for my readers, because this chapter has been tested out heavily. It's enough to make them go, yeah, I can't stop reading this now. I need to continue finding out more about this moment of this character's life. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to look for ways that makes the reader care about that character, to care about learning about that character. Not necessarily, again, this, I think, I'm trying to actually make you like Clytus.
Yeah.
But you don't have to have a likable character. You can still do it with a character that's not likable.
So I think that one of the things that this opening section does is it immediately, like, you don't have to deeply like Clytus. You don't have to have a huge opinion on him, but it puts the character in an immediate position and a continuing position of danger. Because yes, he's ghosted out of the way of these soldiers, but he's clearly not out of the woods yet, right? So he it is in a situation with stakes.
Mm-hmm.
There is some
There,
immediate stakes involved, and there is, the implication that he has this kind of streak of
rebel.
recklessness.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is also, which ties into his character and so on, and then the situation that he's in right now weaves one where the reader has a moment of tension, and there isn't any backstory here. There's not, this is what has happened. This is the reason why the Musari are, patrolling the streets, etc., etc. Because that is part of the mystery, is why are the Musari marching in the
Yeah.
street? What has created the situation? What is he doing here? Why does he have to be hidden, etc., etc.? And you don't dump any of that information, which
Right.
is
That's
nice.
the open-ended question. That's the hook.
Yeah.
So when I'm teaching scene openings, I have 4 things that I try to press upon people to do as quickly as freaking possible. 1, whose head am I in? The distinct clacking of Drakenscale armor assaulted Clytus Rillian's ears. Boom,
Mm,
I'm in Clytus Rillian's head. Where am I? I'm in some type of city with some side alleys. And
mm,
that's really all I need at this moment. I don't need to know what city. I don't need to know what continent. I don't need to know the history of the royal family. I don't need like so many things that so many fantasy people will do at the beginning of it. Why am I here? I don't know why I'm here in this alley, but I do know why I'm hiding in the alley. Because considering current events, these guys might mess me up. So at least I understand why I've hidden myself from these guys. And then the hook is, in my opinion, that it's that, well, what current events? What's going on in this city that he has to hide from guards? He doesn't appear like he's a thief or, that he's been doing something, against the law. He's literally just like, I'd rather not bump into these guys.
yeah.
Not that I've done anything wrong, but that doesn't mean I won't suffer consequences even still, even being innocent. Now, we don't know enough. He could have just walked out of a bank heist. We don't know yet. But
Yeah.
but so I feel like I nail these 4 things, right here in this opening page, which again, that is what, when me and you talk about connect the reader to the character, that moment, this moment in time, why is the camera turned on? Why am I bringing the readers into this world, in this character's head at this moment? And so, that's what I feel like I've accomplished. Again, it's subjective. So there's plenty of people out there that could absolutely hate what I just did, but that's what we're trying to do. There is backstory, and so there is a difference, and sometimes we use those words interchangeably, and I'm trying to change it because I'm just as guilty as Marie. We call backstory or whatever, but really we start talking about it before this thing. And what we really need to do is we need to separate flashbacks from backstory. You can't have an opening chapter that doesn't have backstory. Your story was happening before this chapter started, like it just was. So like we have to know something. You're gonna have to have, like, here, we get the master's words floating in. That happened. That's backstory. That happened before the story. The fact that there's something that has happened to this city, that's backstory. And obviously, if you trust me and I do my job, then fairly quickly I'm going to tell you what that is, because that's coming up soon.
Yeah.
That's backstory. But that's different than a flashback. So like, let's say here on 22, the his master's words floated into his mind. Let's say instead I went, which so many writers would do, his mind wandered back to that time 3 weeks ago. And then I write the scene of him standing on the roof and looking down at his master, and his master going, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I just want to try this out." And then he jumps and his, what he feels and all of that. And maybe that's cool, but what does that do for this moment that I'm in here? It stops it. It completely puts this on hold. I should have just started back then. You say this all the time. If you're writing a flashback in your opening couple of pages or chapter, it's because you didn't start in the right spot. If I need the reader to live the moment of Clytus jumping off that roof, then I need to start the story there. That's obviously important. Now, to me, it's not important. That's not what's important. The reason why that memory is in there is literally in 2 lines. I teach you an entire magic system. Like in 2 lines, you get everything you need to know about what this is. You don't know the details. You know how it works. You don't know what's going on, blah, blah, blah. But you know that there's something called Sujin that this character has that makes him stronger, faster, and tougher. Like, you know this. So that's what that backstory is there for. And it also gives you that he is a rule breaker, a little bit reckless, willing to take risks that other people might think are stupid, shows his youngness. It shows off the lack of experience that he has because he doesn't know if he can survive jumping off of a roof. So it does so much. And technically it's backstory. But there is a difference when we're talking about backstory versus flashbacks.
And I want to delve into there as well with my example, because my example is specifically around how to use backstory as motivation. Like the character's motivation is tied into their backstory, right? So I'm just going to share a piece now. Now, this is not the first chapter in the book. It is the 4th chapter in the book. So there's some world building that precedes this. But this is the first character we're meeting. So when you're at this chapter, you will already know what the left-hand god and the right-hand god is, and the goddess. So you'll understand the 3 god structure.
Yeah. So basically, if you feel a little lost in the world, it's only because you've missed 3 chapters.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's some world building that precedes it. Now, I am going to actually let me just these opening sections, right? I use flavor text to world build and to add additional information and so on. You don't need this information to understand the chapter, but it does deepen the information. And it's normally like this is a legend and a rule around how this trial of waves works and so on.
Yeah.
And it just gives you some of the vocabulary in more detail.
Yeah. Do you want to read that? I know it has nothing to do with your example, but it might help.
Sure. When the first boats were only driftwood, the spirit set those who know the ways of power, the Lumakoi, on the outer isles, beyond the reach of safe harbors. Power is not given, it is found, as a sailor finds the unseen shore. And there the Lumakoi abide still, and there must those who would join their ranks sail. Such aspirants must build their own vessel, shaping both of the hulls with their hands and carving the mast with their knife. No one may guide them, no sail may carry them but their own. As the first apprentices found their master, so must they find a Lumakoi isle. Some will turn back, the left-hand god will swallow others. But those who read the wind, who listen to the stars, who let the waves carry their name, those are the ones the Lumahokoi will teach. For no Lumahokoi is made without the sea. Origin of the Trial of Waves, Legend of the Tide Speakers. I just want to say on a side note, the reason why that starts with when the first boats were only driftwood is because the oldest legend that we know of, the legend of Gilgamesh, starts with before there was bread, which I just thought was such a great, like in the time before there was bread. So for this culture, which is a very boat-heavy culture, I was like, when the first boats were only driftwood.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But this flavor text is actually very important. And if you are a reader out there that you haven't read any of Maria's work and you're coming into this, I think this really does set the stage to help you understand this. Just understand that this is deeper into the story. So you might have a few things that you're like, I don't understand, but it's because you missed some things.
Yeah.
But if my understanding is correct, this is the first time we meet Mahin.
Yes.
This is his introduction chapter.
Yes. This is his introduction chapter.
To his
and it's the
conflict.
first time we really encounter this culture, this specific, because, each culture in my world is very distinct.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Mahin knelt inside the left hull of his karkarang and murmured a prayer. He touched his oilcloth to his forehead, the sweet scent of coconuts thick on the brown rag. Keeping his eyes turned away from the beach, he dipped the cloth in a pot and prepared to oil his boat. Behind him, someone broke into song, a working chant. They must be digging the fire pit for the fish. Mahin set his jaw and focused only on his task. With each stroke of the rag, he invoked the god's protection as he worked his way to the prow of the left karang. The wood gleamed dark as his skin, despite the sun's bleaching over the past year. The scent of coconut oil permeated the air, like a blessing made real. In the sharp prow of the left karang, he prayed to the goddess to eternally balance both his hulls and climbed over to the right karang. Dipping his cloth once more, he made the mistake of looking up. The bay of Talamani Island buzzed with activity. Islanders wore garlands of red and gold flowers, draping them over the wooden poles that lined the beach. Children raced up and down. Their laughter rang out as they gathered dried palm fronds for the evening's bonfire. Sailors dragged their karkarangs far up the beach. By the slowly deepening fire pits, full nets waited for the barbecue to start. Their joy curdled in Mahin's chest, strangling his breath. Everyone was preparing to welcome the triumphant return of a mage aspirant who had passed the trial of waves and found herself a lumahoku to teach her magic. Mahin's hands clenched on the lip of his karang. Unbidden and unstoppable, the images of his own quest washed over him. He had set out to find one of the wise teachers, the Lumahokui who resided on the Outer Rim Islands. But a squall had shattered one of his karangs, and he had to turn back. When he beached empty-handed on Talamani Bay, the disappointment in his family's eyes had cut deeper than a knife ever could. His hands wrung together, slick palms refusing to clench. Oil. He had to oil the boat. So
Yeah.
I think I'll stop there for this section and just explain, like, the setup here is Mahin is in contrast. There's a tension between what's happening on the beach and what Mahin is doing, right? That's what I
what
tried
he's
to
feeling
do here.
internally.
Yeah, Mahin internally is not joyful. He's very unhappy right now. And yet around him, everybody else is very happy. And I'm trying to use that emotional contrast as my tension point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with him looking up and him seeing the thing on the beach that really should be a happy, joyful thing, and it's not happy, joyful. And then you get the moment of like, he had failed at this task.
Mm-hmm.
And then I
there's
use
one,
this whole section to build out that a karkarang is a double-hulled canoe, which is
right. Well, and I do want to make a plea to the masses. So my writing style, I do not use flavor text. I've never used it. The closest I come is that my chapter titles, and I don't know if anybody's ever even noticed this, but my chapter titles are really short, usually 2 to 3, 2, 3, 4 words, that encapsulate the feel of that scene. So like the one that I just read was Tiny Lifeless Bodies. However, it is always verbatim directly lifted from the chapter. Those words in that order are in the chapter. Every single chapter title that you will find somewhere if you look from it. And I don't think anybody's ever noticed it, but that's as close as I come to a flavor text. However, I do know a lot of people skip flavor text, and it's so dumb to me because this right here, without that flavor text, this is the outcome. This is the desire. Without this flavor text, you don't understand why him working on these boats and why his failure is important. This sets it up. So if you're out there, especially in fantasy, because there's a lot of fantasy, not maybe 10 or 15, 20%, it's not a huge amount, but like if you read Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn, if you don't read that flavor text, you still understand the story, but oh my goodness, there's a whole story inside of a story that's happening in that flavor text that you miss.
You'll miss a whole story if you skip Mistborn's flavor text.
Yeah. So this is just me saying, hey guys, if you're out there and you're one of those, it's like, I just don't want to read the flavor text. It doesn't do anything. it actually, the writers that use flavor text put a lot of time and effort into what that flavor text is going to bring to their story. And like in this piece, and you do this all the time, your flavor text actually, like, I feel like if you don't read the flavor text that you write, I do believe that you don't really get the full depth of the scene.
So what you'll miss if you skip my flavor text is there's still enough information. I feel there's still enough information in the chapter that you'll figure out what a lumakoi is. You'll figure out what a boat is. All of that is kind of there. But if you skip the flavor text, you will miss the depth of the
Yeah.
cultural commitment to this whole setup. That's what you'll miss.
Yeah.
And because I world build very deep, that means that you'll miss a depth. Now, you don't need that depth, right? You can just read it lightly, but you will miss some of
I
the depth I
disagree.
put into the world building.
If you're an epic fantasy fan and you feel like you don't need depth, then you're not an epic fantasy fan. You're an adventure fantasy fan. So one of the people in the chat room just said something, and we are making a mistake here. We didn't define flavor text. This is maybe the first time we ever mentioned it. So flavor text is just that stuff that happens at the beginning of a chapter that is just extra information. A lot of times it's an excerpt from a holy book, or like what you have here, where it's more of a parable or a religious
legend.
Yeah, legend, whatever. So that's all flavor text is. It's usually italicized. It's usually credited to, another fictitious book in this fictitious world. So like, that's what flavor text is. It's just that thing that starts at the top of every of the chapters. Again, I don't use them, and I've never used it, but not because I'm against it. I just don't. My storytelling doesn't go that route. I'm not that type of storyteller, where you are. Like, you're so grounded in culture and history and everything like that. And you're blue collar. I'm in the moment. We're going to live right now. And I don't really I'll give you some history, and yes, the world was there, but my story isn't based around the history. It's based around the event that's happening right this second. So I've just never needed to have to think about stuff like this. But if I'm telling you, if you're out there and you're not reading the flavor text, you're missing out.
So I do stuff like I just did this recently. So understand, I do stuff like this. I was like, okay, I need a new timekeeping device, because I have this thing in Sangwheel where I do different types of timekeeping for different types of culture, right? So my Empire culture uses candle clocks. My Kisangi culture uses water clocks. And then I was like, okay, I've now got two new cultures. I need new timekeeping devices. And then I was like, wouldn't it be interesting if I'd use some cultural syncretization here? So if one culture developed a thing that another culture then got. So then I developed this whole thing with like alcohol dissolving wax to create a timekeeping device based on the chemical reaction, and how this island culture developed it first, and then the Empire's alchemists came and stole it from them, and it's a point of contention between them who developed this thing first and who has the coolest timekeeping. I don't know if any reader will ever see any of that detail, but it amused the crap out of me, and I've got a whole legend out of it which will provide flavor text for something at some point. So does that matter to the story? No. No, it does not.
Not yet, anyway, but it could.
It could. There will be, but it will matter to when the characters of those cultures interact, right? It will inform how they interact with each other.
Yes.
It'll build out why they interact with each other. Do you need it to understand it as a reader? No. And if you skip my flavor text, you skip my flavor text. But, it is there.
You're missing out.
Yeah.
Just saying.
So anyway,
so that's what flavor text is.
My point with that character, however,
but yes, let's get back to the
was that my Hin failed this test. It is his motivation as a character, and I give that to you in the first page with like he had failed this. It is backstory. It is backstory on page 1 of that character's introduction. But it is short. It is given immediately, and it is given in context with tension. because you have the joyful scene and you have Mahin's internal conflict, and that tension, that internal tension, gives rise to sharing that very brief moment of backstory with the reader.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is what a lot of writers miss. They miss what is the intent of the thing. So you could have started the story with him out at sea, fighting, losing his hull and all this other stuff. You could start it before that, where he's getting ready to go out there, and then have him go out there. But at the end of the day, that character, all the reader needs is to understand that that character today is motivated because he failed in the past. It's the failure that is all that matters, and that can be given very quickly. And so when I'm thinking about how I do my backstory, and it's not that I've never done a flashback, but there's always little tricks and tips. And like one of the things that I always feel like a hypocrite when I'm saying this is, in the opening chapter of the Genesis saga, there are probably 3 or 4 pages of actual flashback in the opening chapter. But it's this weird magical thing where the character today is watching his flashback that is happening in front of him. So you're not living the flashback, you're actually living the current character that you're meeting and how he sees his flashback. And so I still cheated in that way, where I kept you in the now, even though, but I think it's very important. If you do not have that, then his next scene doesn't have the impact that it needs without that.
I think that this is what writers miss when they write flashbacks. You are taking, unless you use, I'm going to say a gimmick, but what I just mean is a technique to keep the reader.
That's all a gimmick is.
Yeah, right.
It's not a negative term. I don't understand why so many writers think when we say gimmick, we're saying
I don't mean it negatively. I mean, you're using a technique to keep the writer in the now. Okay, unless you do that, which, I mean, I've also done it. I've also explored a character's backstory in that same way with a technique where you're with the character who is now watching the character's past.
Yes.
But the problem is, if you do a straight flashback, like you put it in italics and you take me back to the character as they were then, this is not the character I am invested in this moment. This is the character as they were back then. Now, maybe I am interested in finding out how they became the characters. Maybe we're far long enough that I am interested. But I still don't want pages of backstory. And I'm still more interested in the plot now. I don't want to be taken back and have to spend a whole chapter catching up with the current plot again. Because I'm invested in the character and their storyline now, in the now. Right. So again, I'm not saying never, I'm not saying don't use it. I'm saying be aware of when you use these techniques, the pitfalls that comes with them, and how to kind of work around them.
And one other addition, actually ask what the payoff is.
Yeah.
So like with yours, the payoff was this character's motivated by a past failure.
Yeah.
We all get that. We all understand that. We all are right. I don't need to live his past failure to understand that his past failure motivates him. So if the only thing I want to do as a storyteller is to make sure my reader understands that motivation comes from a failure of his in the past, that is such a universal thing that we're golden with that.
Yeah.
And I want to, I have one also that kind of shows that same thing from this same chapter. So just to kind of go a little deeper into it, or not necessarily deeper, but show a different angle of it, if it'll share. All right. So what's happened now from that opening thing that I read is you have learned that he's a foreigner, that's actually a foreigner that's been at war with the country that he's now currently living in. His people and their people have been at war for hundreds, if not thousands of years. They do not like each other. So that's why being a foreign born is so dangerous for him. And you've learned that the problem is that maybe his people, the leader of his people, have either kidnapped or assassinated the 1-year-old princess of this kingdom. So that's why everybody's really pissed. And that's why, obviously, if the guards found one of his race, even though he might not have anything to do with it, they may just beat the crap out of him because they're mad. And so you've learned all this stuff. You've learned that to hear. But I now need to give my readers the reason why Clytus is going to get into this story. Because, obviously we've learned that the 1-year-old princess is missing. Maybe that's important. So I'll just start at 104. Along the way, he passed a decorative grove at the center of one section, and he is just walking through the city. Light glinting off of something caught his eye. He paused and knelt. Someone had left a copper coin in the open palm of a life-size statue of a child peeking out from between bamboo stalks. The small effigies littered this district. They stood frozen as they ran and played, smiles and laughter etched into every sandstone face. So different from home. He ran his fingers over the child's gleeful features. Even the statues of children here enjoy their existence. Unbidden and unwanted, the image of Nibby clawed into his mind. 2 boys, no more than 6 seasons old, huddled under the remains of a shattered crate in an attempt to stay dry. Freezing rain, almost horizontal in the whipping wind, cut them to the bone. It was one of Clytus's earliest memories, and one he wished he could forget. The moment Nibby stopped shivering will haunt me until I pass into the aftermore. How his body grew colder and colder, even as I clung to him for warmth. He had been nothing but a boy, of course. What could he have done? Even knowing that, he had never found a way to forgive himself in the season since. Standing, he raked the back of his gloved hand across his eyes to chase away an errant tear. Adjusting his sword that had gone askew, he resumed his walk home. So I just went back in time. I gave you some backstory. When he was 6, he was holding another 6-year-old trying to stay warm, and the 6-year-old died in his arms. I don't need to go back and actually live that moment to impart upon my reader that must have been a horrific moment of his life.
Yeah.
Like, we're done.
It shapes his reactions going forward in the story.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's organic, it's short, there's a reason why it comes up, and that's how you look for these moments to give the little bits of backstory that the reader needs to understand the scene. Not the entire history of the character, just what they need now.
Yeah. And I hate dissecting it like this because it sounds so clinical, but literally, why are there statues of children in this district that he's walking through? Because I need to have a flashback of his childhood. That's the only reason why those statues exist, is because they are a plot device that I use to organically, because the reader just feels like it's happening. And it's like, yeah, of course he would think about his past when he looks at this child. Why wouldn't he? So that's what I'm doing, is I'm looking to create things that are going to organically cause the story to go in a direction that I need it to go, to give the reader the information that they need to understand this story. So
why was my hin oiling his boat? Because I needed the reader to understand they use double-hulled canoes and they call them karkarangs.
Right. Exactly. So it sounds scientific or sterile or whatever, but that is a part of writing. If you know what you've got to accomplish in a scene, then you can actually invent the mechanisms that you need so that it feels like stuff is just happening.
Yeah.
Like, he's just walking home. He just happens to see a statue of a kid. He happens to be like, this place is so much nicer than where I grew up, which happens to bring up a memory of, his worst memory as a child, that then happens to teach you how he feels about children. And there's some little bit more of it, a little bit on, because obviously at the end of the scene, or maybe not obviously, but what happens at the end of the scene is he gets handed a note, and basically is the only one that has any chance of saving this missing princess and avoiding a war between this country and his birth country. And so why would he ever pick up that quest? Because you also learn that pretty much everyone of his race that's in this country is a slave. There's very few freemen of his things, of his race, and none of his race has ever stepped foot on royal grounds without being either a slave or dead. And he basically has to go to the palace now. Like, why would he ever decide to go and rescue this foreigner's, princess? Well, because you learn how much the fact, and and then obviously you get that when we get down there, where he's like, the thought of his inaction causing the death of even one child was more than he could take. Like, he couldn't live with himself if he did nothing and it caused a child to die, even if it's the foreign-born, foreigner's princess. It doesn't matter at that point. It's a child. And so, this is what we're talking about.
And that's what this gives you. That's what that moment gives you, is that organic exploration of his backstory.
Yeah, you get down to the bottom of it, and he starts heading toward the palace, even though he knows it's gonna be his death. And the reader's like, yeah, of course he is. Like, why would he would never not do that? Of course he would do that. So that is what we're trying to show here. Is it's not about not putting backstory in. You have to put backstory in. You have to, readers have to know motivations and understand characters and all of this. But there is a way to do it that is organic, that feels like it's just a part of it's just the logical progression of things.
And that doesn't just dump
yes
character.
Because that's the other, not only would it be bad for me to break this story here, put you in the head of a 6-year-old Clytus, have them running around trying to get food, and then the storm comes, and then them, all that, and then living through Nibby's death and all of that, which would be horrifyingly tragic to live through. But would it give me any more than what I gave you here, knowing that when he was 6, he held a boy that died when he was 6? Like, no, it doesn't. All of that is horrendous. So I don't need to live that moment to understand how much that would affect me if that was me doing that.
Now, I do want to draw a distinction here, because I've had this discussion as well. Say, like, there's a difference between saying, okay, you should start the story when he was 6 because you have to show this moment. Obviously, that's not true. And say, okay, this event happened 2 days ago, and I now need to understand this event in detail before I understand the rest of the story. Then you go back 2 days ago and you start the story there.
There is a difference in the timeline. It's crazy. If something happened, even if it happened, let's say it happened a year before this, that's still a close enough version of this character that if it is that important, that the reader must know the nuances of, because that's what you do when you're actually writing the scene. They're getting the nuances of it. You don't get the nuances of what happened to him and Nibby when they were 6, because you just get
the effect.
Right. You don't need the nuances.
Like, does the reader need to understand the effect, or do they need to live the nuances?
Right.
And that's the question of where you start.
Exactly. So even if it was...
What's backstory is what the reader only needs to understand the effect.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. So if it did happen 2 days ago, but I don't need you to know the nuances. I just need you to know the effects. Like your boy could have failed 2 days ago.
Yeah.
It's fine. I still don't need to start the story back then, because I don't need to actually travel with him as he fails.
You don't need to know, you don't need the details of how he failed. You just need to know that he failed.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah. So that's really where you start asking those questions. So
what do I need to know the nuances of, and what do I need the detail of the reader to live through?
Right. So last night in the writer's room, I was working with one author, and she's writing an incredibly dark, tragic, bloody, horrifying story. And you, because she actually was in your group, had convinced her that she needs to back up in time. And so she did. And we did a lot of work on that. But when we got talking about it at the end, she asked me, she was like, well, do I need to even do this? Like, why do I need to do this? And I was like, well, that's what you got to answer. If it was me, because of the type of writer I am, the reason why I would start it there is because I would make it happy and loving and awesome, because that family is about to be murdered.
Yeah.
And if I make you love this family and love their interactions and it's all great, then when I murder them, it's gonna hurt. But that's the reason why I would do it, not to tell you how they got to how the family was murdered. That doesn't matter to me. The fact that how the main character became a slave of these pirates, none of that matters to me, because I don't need that for the story that I'm telling. However, if I can crush your soul over the death of the family, that matters, because the character's dealing with that death through the story. Like, that is a part of that story. So I do think it's a good idea to back up from before where she started. You don't have to have it to understand the story. Yeah. What it does is it increases the drama, it increases the pain, it increases
and that's exactly why I encouraged this, because her original first chapter was very much like, this was my relationship with my father, this was my relationship with my brother, etc., from the main narrative character. And I was like, it would be way more impactful if we'd seen those relationships, those happy relationships of this happy family, and then they were murdered.
Yeah. Yeah. Or just don't try to push it in to the story. Yeah. Like, if you're going to start where she started, which would have been fine. I love that story. Then you have to do more like these two examples that we've done here, where you just give me the effect. Yeah. I don't need to know that the brother, had aspirations of this and was, gonna do this and enjoyed playing this and all this other stuff. I don't need any of that once I'm in the
none
thick
of that. Yeah, because all of that is nuance that you would only show if it's going to be part of the story.
Right.
The effect is he was a happy boy and he's now a slave. Like, this is a dramatic effect.
Yeah.
Right? And again, that's like all the reader needs if you're not going to show them the happy family.
Right. But again, where I went to is, why would I step back in time a day or two and write that? Because it's going to crush the reader's soul. Not because I need you to learn the family, and not because I need you to know the brother and the father and the sisters and all of that. I don't need any of that for the story. However, if I can make you love that family, then now you get to feel what my character felt when his family was murdered. If I start after the murder.
And then the ultimate denouement of the story, which I also know, will be that much more impactful, and the reader will be that much more. Yeah.
If we start where she started, which was after the murder, it's fine.
Yeah.
There's literally nothing wrong with it. No way is necessarily better than the other. But now you started after that. So you can never make me really care. And that's what she was trying to do with some of her backstory. Yeah. She's trying to now make me care for these people that are dead.
Yes. But they're that's dead. Done. I'm never going to meet them, therefore I don't care about them.
Right. I'm never going to have that same love and concern for them after the fact.
Exactly.
Whereas if I fall in love with them before they're dead and I don't even know they're going to die, and then shockingly it comes out of the blue and, oh my goodness, don't do that to Mother. I love Mother. Like, now I feel what that character feels. Again, neither way is right and neither way is wrong necessarily. It's what you're trying to do with your story on whether I would decide to.
But this, this does segue me into one more thing that I want to talk about, and that is people writing relationships in a very tally way in their opening chapters. So
before we get to that, since I did mention it,
sure.
Let me go ahead and tell everybody about the Writer's Room in case they want to actually improve their writing for reals. Are you ready to take your writing to the next level? Well, you need to head on over to writersroom.us and join me in the Writer's Room. First of all, there's a free section. Now, you don't get access to everything in the free section, but you do get access to a lot of things. Like, I do a monthly critique group in there, so you can bring your stuff in, get critiqued by me, and be critiqued by others and critique others. I do a Q&A every month for a free section. You can join us live as we're recording Releasing in Your Dragon. That's a part of the free stuff. There's a whole bunch of things. But yes, the magic does happen if you become a full member. Now, I get it. There's a lot of other websites out there that are membership sites to help you become a better writer. I'm not saying they don't do that for you. What I am saying though is us writers are broke, and most of them are charging $200, $300, $400. I've even seen them for $800 a month. That's insane for a starving writer. We are trying to be much more in line. Now, the normal price of the writer's room is going to be $100, and you'll get access to everything that I'm talking about here. But for the first 250 members who join, because we are kind of in that building mode and we're adding things and so on and so forth, you'll get it for 50% off for life. So for $49 a month, you get multiple critique groups that you can come to every single week. I do a class in there every month. I do a writing workshop in there every month. I do a development pod every month in there where you can actually sit down with me, and me and you together can work on any problem areas that you might be having in your story. Maybe it's a weak character arc or a sagging middle, or you don't feel the ending is quite punchy enough. Well, you want to sit down with me and bounce some ideas to see if that helps you with your stuff? You have access to that in the writer's room, and so much more. A writing contest for a publishing contract, all sorts of things. So if you really are serious about writing and you really want to take your writing to that next level, then you should head on over to the writersroom.us and join me in the writer's room. All right. Now that that's out of the way, continue, please.
Sure. So, with regards to relationships, right, there is a very big degree to which people go like, oh, well, let me tell you about the relationship these two characters have. And then, because I need to info dump all of this information on you so that you understand the relationship. I'm like, just write it. Just write it. So, and I just want to share share on my side again, and I will take you through how I tried to do that in this very chapter. All right, has it come through?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So we're going to pick up right where we were. So Mahin he's oiling his boat. Okay, but his rag hung limp as the double-masted sail of the Karkarang appeared on the horizon. They mocked him, those sails, quartering into the wind and carrying their promise of another aspirant's triumph toward the shore. A thump on the hull behind him had Mahin spinning to face the beach. Kahelu leaned on his cane beside the Karkarang, his weathered face scrunched into its usual scowl. Mahin touched his forehead in respect. Master of charts, how may I assist? The old man snorted. Stop standing there like a half-sunken log. You've got a message to deliver. Mahin's jaw tightened. A message? Now? Yes, now. What, you think you'll be missed? Kahelu waved his knobby stick towards the Karkarang approaching the bay. You've got a better use standing here, sulking? Go to Mala'aut. Tell them we have a Lumahoku visiting and they're expected to bring offerings. Rub your sister's success in their faces a bit, rather than pushing your own nose into the shit. Mahin hesitated, glancing back toward the bustling shore. I could stay. Kahelu barked a laugh. Stay? For what? To stand around while everyone praises her and pretends not to notice you? No, boy, you've got work to do. Unless you want me to send someone who actually listens. Heat flushed Mahin's face. He bit back his retort, jumping out behind his Karkarang. No, honored master. Kahelu stepped closer, his voice softening just enough to sting more than his usual sharpness. It's for your own good, Mahin. Better to be out on the waves than here, where every smile feels like a shark's tooth. Mahin couldn't form an answer. Would that his Elamar just let him launch the Karkarang and leave, but such was not his luck. He kept his face turned away from the bustling activity on the beach and maneuvered a launch glide under the Karkarang. With some grunting and a muttered curse, he pushed the vessel into the quiet turquoise waters of the bay. Blessed winds, Kahelo called out from the beach. Mahin turned and forced a response over his lips. Safe shores, master. And then he steps up and he lurches forward and he's out there. So what this section of the introduction attempts to do is it is taking It is establishing a relationship between Kahelu and Mahin. And further, it also establishes, obviously, that it is Mahin's actual sister that's coming in with like this thing. Now, their kinship relationship is weird, but that's a different story. And it establishes that Mahin has this relationship with Kahelu, who is one of those older mentor types who believe in a kind of tough love approach.
Mm-hmm.
And what I try to do, and I don't know, my readers will tell me whether I succeeded, is to establish all of that through the dialogue and
Mm-hmm.
actions of the two characters rather than saying, Mahin had studied under Kahelu for the past 2 years in the arts of navigation, and the
Yeah.
old man was a strict blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. You avoided just info dumping their relationship and you showed us. It's the same thing with the memory of the master.
Yeah.
Like, I don't say, he was a gruff master, or he, hated that Clytus didn't follow the rules. I mean, I showed it to you. He literally says it. He calls him a fool.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't need to tell you their relationship. You don't need to tell them the relationship between the older guy and the younger POV. We get to see it. We saw him soften. We saw him, like, he actually cares for the POV.
Yeah.
He does. Like, you can see it in there. I don't need to say, as hard as he was, I knew that he actually liked me.
Like,
right. I don't need to say any of that. And a lot of that has to do with confidence. We talk about this a lot in the writer's room, where it's, why did you show in this line and then tell the exact same thing in the next line? It's because you're not confident that your show is going to deliver to your audience what it is. And that's two ways. One, you're not confident of your abilities, and two, you're not confident of the reader's intelligence. First of all, readers are very intelligent. They'll get it. And as I always say, and if they don't get my shows, then they're not a smart enough reader to read me anyway. So they don't need to be reading me. But two, I'm pretty confident that the vast majority of the people are going to get, just like what we just did here. I think the vast majority of people are going to get what type of master he has. And I think the readers are going to get what type of relationship those two have out of the interaction. We're showing them that growth, not telling them. Or showing them that relationship, sorry, not growth, but relationship, not telling them what the relationship is. And that cuts back all that backstory that wouldn't be needed, because it's not needed. I don't need to say, he hated how rough he was on him, but he did know that he loved him deep inside. I don't need that. I just saw that. Yeah. And so you need to trust your reader. You need to trust your ability as a writer to have done that. Now, how do you build that confidence? How do you build the fact that I feel pretty confident that I'm doing what I'm doing? You test it. As one of my Drakeisms goes, you do not have the ability to decide if what you've done works. It is outside of your wheelhouse. You're too close to it. Of course it works for you, because you have too much information. You have to show it to others and then let them tell you, yeah, no, I get it. I get their relationship. Their relationship is like this. And you're like, check. I've done my job, check. And the more checks you do, like me and you've been doing this for a while now, the more checks you get in your little ledger, the more you start realizing, yeah, I probably nailed this one. I feel pretty good about this. And because I want to say that's an unedited chapter that you just kind of showed up, because I think you're still in the process of writing that chapter.
Yeah, so I have had alpha feedback on it.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so even though, like, I'm a lot more confident now than I was when I started this journey, I still make sure that I still make sure other people read my chapters. I still get chapter by chapter feedback. I still send it for beta reading afterwards and get beta reader feedback, because I live in Sangwheel. I know that world. Like, to me, I know exactly what a card could. I don't have any questions.
Right. And you are also your favorite author.
Yeah, of course.
So of course you love everything you do. Yeah. You can make no mistake. I can make no mistake to myself.
No, of course.
Like, everything I do is absolutely the perfect way to do it.
Exactly. For me. Like, if it wasn't, why would I be doing this? Like, come on.
But you're too close to it. You must have other people that, actually tell you whether you've done it right or not.
Yes.
Like there's just no other ways. There's no other ways to do it. You're too close to the work. You do not have the ability to decide if what you've done is good or not.
Exactly.
Only other people can tell you that. And if they tell you, and again, it's subjective, as we talked about earlier. So it's if one person says you failed and 7 other people say you succeeded, then you've probably succeeded, because you
Yes.
can never bat, like I said, you can never bat 1,000.
1,000.
But if 3, 4, 5 out of 10 are saying you failed, then that's a 3 out of 5 stars, 3.5 out of 5 stars. I don't want that. That's not where I want to sit as in my career. So guess what? Even though I love it, I'm going to do some changes. I'm going to do some edit. I'm going to figure out why I missed the mark with the vast majority or more, or with a large percentage of them. And I'm going to edit and I'm going to change. Because at the end of the day, I'm not buying my book from myself. That would not be a way that I could pay my bills.
Yeah.
So I've got to do that. And I know we're kind of at time. I do want to do one last thing that I think will help people out, because I think this is another, it dovetails into this a little bit. It's not exactly this, but I want to kind of just show an example of how to scene set and world build in an active way.
Okay.
So we'll do that, and then we'll call this in the can. All right. So what I try to teach people is, don't do the traditional way that everyone does it, where you have 3 or 4 paragraphs of this is what everything looks like around me, with no character in it. It's just, you're just like, and the walls look like this, and the floor look like this, and the ceiling look like this, and the chair look like that, and the, like that. Yes, I get it. It's been done that way for centuries. That doesn't mean it's good.
Tour guiding.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't, it's not engaging. So what I try to impart upon people is, first of all, you should scene set through the entire scene, because there's stuff that can be, explained and shown to the readers as the scene goes on. But the big key to it is, in my opinion, it should be always active. The thing about writing in prose, when you're writing in limited, now this is limited, so third person limited or first person, it is the ultimate exercise in narcissism. The POV character is literally the center of the universe, literally, not figuratively. Like everything revolves around them. So, they are the perfect example of a narcissist. So it's not about describing the world factually. It's just about describing the world as the character is experiencing it. So what I try to say is, you should describe everything either by the character interacting with the setting interacting with the character, or the setting interacting with the setting. And so that, and I include everything. The word setting, the definition to me in this context, is everything that isn't the POV character. So other characters, weather, literally everything that isn't the POV character is that. So to break it down, I'm going to describe everything by the character interacting with everything, or something, something interacting with the character, or something interacting with something. So like this little paragraph right here is one of my favorites that kind of teach this. So this is back to the Clytus story. He's getting ready to, I'm getting ready to expand the world a little bit and kind of show you a little bit more about kind of what things are around him. So this is a part of that walking process where he's just taking in the sights. Cresting a hill, his gaze fell over the endless expanse of the great ocean. The tiny red moon winked at him from the distant horizon, yet the sea had already begun devouring the smaller of the 2 red moons. And though a silvery glow still flooded the streets around him, the larger of the 2 moons was past its zenith as well. Night birds sang under the moonlight, their chirps tugging at his eyelids and ushering him to bed. So, first of all, to give credit where credit's due, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong on this because my memory is not 100%, but I'm pretty sure you gave me the red moon winking at him from the horizon. I'm pretty sure that came from you. But anyway, if we go through here, cresting a hill. So I'm not saying there was a hill. He is interacting with the hill. He's cresting it. His gaze is falling over the endless expanse of the great ocean. You get to see the great ocean because he sees it. The tiny red moon is winking at him. It is interacting with him from the distant horizon. The sea is devouring that little moon, which means the sea is interacting with the moon. There's silvery light flooding around him. but that means that the larger the two moons is past its zenith, because it's interacting with the location of itself in the sky. Night birds are chirping under the moonlight, so they're interacting with the moonlight, and they are tugging at his eyelids, ushering him to bed. I've just described what this place looks like, but it's active. Everything is doing something. I don't say, there was a red moon and a larger silver moon, and there was an ocean in front of him, and he heard birds singing. Like, I don't do any of that. I literally describe this by having them all be active. Everything is interacting with everything, which it does quite a few things. First of all, it makes scene setting enjoyable to read and interesting to read and engaging to read, but it also continues to feed that movie feel of my writing. So many of my fans will say over and over again, reading Drake feels like watching a movie. I don't even notice the words. I just see the pictures. I see the images. I see, the motions. And I think one of the big reasons for that is because I never just puke like, here's what the wall looked like. The wall is interacting with him, or he's interacting with the wall, or the wall is interacting with something else. That doesn't mean that it's all the time. Sometimes I do, the wall looks like this. It's not about 100% show, but because I'm 80% show, it means that those 20% times where it's just easier for me to tell, because sometimes I don't need to spend the word count to, like, maybe the wall is just gray. It's a gray wall. I don't need to expand and write 12 words to show you the gray wall. It's just a freaking gray wall. So I'll say the wall was gray. The wall was a plain gray, whatever. Yes, is that a tell 100%? But it's a tell in a sea of show.
Yeah.
And so you skim right over it. And also, I'm not going to spend a paragraph telling you about the wall. I'm going to have a little line that tells you about the wall because it's not important. But when it's in a sea of show, the readers just don't notice it. It's not there long enough to register.
It's like that scene where I created the island scene of like everybody getting ready for the party, right?
Yes.
It's now I didn't put the character in there because that is the tension. The tension is that the character is not there.
Right.
But I had, the children interacting and the fishermen acting and the things being dragged up, and it paints the scene of activity, not static.
Yeah. So you're still following one of the three. You're still doing the setting is interacting with the setting. The setting doesn't always have to interact with the character. The character doesn't always have to interact with the setting.
Yeah.
But everything needs to interact with something. That's the point. Well, and again, it's not 100%. Sometimes it's just a gray wall. Great.
So, and sometimes that's fine. But I mean, if you can have the character interact with the setting, great. But sometimes, like in my case, I was deliberately not having the character be there because that is the tension. That's the tension I'm using. So, and then I just paint the scene because it's contrasting with the character's emotions or the character's emotional state.
But it's active.
But it's an active scene. And I mean, you're talking about a grey wall. So just on that, like I wrote a scene recently where I had a character walk into a lodge, and there's a wall paint, a friend, what do you call those things? A friends, with that, those things. And she saw the thing, but I didn't just say like it's the image of the dude on his chariot charging into a war scene. It evoked an emotion in her, and that is what I then, because it doesn't matter that there's a fringe on the wall that shows a dude on a chariot. That's not what's important. What's important is how does it make the character feel to see that image?
Yeah. And it can be all sorts of ways. So in the new story that I'm writing for Harn World, so this is after the fall of Karaz, the character comes up, there's nothing but death all around. And to take his eyes off the dead bodies, he looks across the hall, and I describe this fresco of the founding of the city of Karaz, and then one of their most important moments, which was this bridge, this crossroads bridge thing. But then internally he goes, it says something like, both testaments of dwarven ingenuity and strength and resilience. And then the next line is him thinking, and none of it matters anymore at all. And then I talk about, then he comes back to the dead bodies,
Mm.
because I'm using that as a contrast of him going, I used to be so proud of my race.
Mm.
I used to be proud of what we've done. And look at what it's done.
Yeah.
Like, everyone I love is dead. What good is your damn city? What good is your damn, bridge when my mother's dead?
Yeah.
So it is. But again, I didn't describe those scenes to describe those scenes. Now, the funny thing is I actually describe them in the first story, because he is proud of it. There's this big proud moment. The city's, nothing's happened negative to the city. Everyone's alive. And so it's a callback to the other story, because in that one, he's looking at those same exact two pictures on the wall and thinking, yes, my race, we're awesome. And then in the next story, I come back to it and it's worthless. It doesn't matter. Who cares that we did this stuff? And so it is about the emotion. It's about, and again, that's the characters interacting
about
with
what the
what they're
character
seeing.
feels.
Mhm.
What does the character feels about the scene that they're interacting with?
And that is another thing of notes.
And I think that is a good place to end this episode. And we will see you soon for another one.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. This is Marie Mullaney, your co-host on this literary adventure. Our goal is to provide you with valuable insights and discussions on writing. If you believe in our mission, please like and subscribe our podcast. Sharing our episodes with your community not only helps us grow, but also contributes to a richer, more diverse conversation about storytelling. We appreciate your support. For a deeper understanding of the topics we've discussed, head over to Just in Time Worlds on YouTube. It is a treasure trove where fantasy meets history and science. Every Tuesday, you'll find new videos that delve into the intricacies of world building, drawing from our rich real-world history. Whether you're a writer, a role player, or just a fantasy enthusiast, Just in Time Worlds offers unique insights that will enrich your perspective. Check it out and join the journey of crafting incredible worlds.
If you are ready to take your writing to the next level and work with a group of highly motivated, dedicated writers who are all working to not only improve their writing, but improve your writing, plus you get to work with me on a weekly basis, then I'll encourage you to check out writersroom.us. This is a website that I have created that I really wish I had 30 years ago. It's everything a writer needs to become a better writer. Not only do we do weekly critique sessions, both from other members as well as me, we have daily writing sessions, I do monthly classes, Q&As, we have activities, I do all sorts of learning exercises, such as I do a quarterly writing prompt contest, and just tons and tons and tons of things. So if you're ready to get serious about your writing and you want to actually finish that novel and have a chance of it being published, then I encourage you to head on over to the Writer's Room and join me there. And as a special promotion for listeners of Releasing Your Inner Dragon, I'll go one step more. If you would like to get 50% off for 3 months, reach out to me. There's a million ways you can do that. You can do it through starvingwriterstudio.com, drakeu.com, any of my social medias such as LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever. Reach out to me, say that you would like to check out the Writer's Room for 50% off, and I will send you a link that will allow you to do just that. So hopefully you're ready to start getting serious about writing, and I'll see you in the Writer's Room.